Dark Souls is not a game that needs much introduction. It was voted as the ultimate game of all time at the Golden Joystick Awards in 2021, beating titles like Minecraft, Doom, and Legend of Zelda. For the last decade and a half, the Souls games were unanimously hailed as some of the best but also most punishing gaming experience ever made. As someone who has only played turn-based RPGs his entire life, I can't help but wonder why people love Souls games so much. So I decided to play them for myself to find out if they're really as good as people say. The first stop, Dark Souls 1. Is it that good? Despite its fame, Dark Souls has a very humble beginning. It's actually not the first Souls game. From Software's previous title, Demon Souls, was released only in Japan for the PS3 and was considered a financial failure by its publisher Sony. Despite this, the studio didn't give up on their goal of making a game true to their vision, so they gave the dark fantasy genre another try. However, due to copyright laws, From Software couldn't use the title Demon Souls for the sequel, so the studio announced the game at the 2010 Tokyo Game Show under the name Project Dark. This time around, the position of game director was also entrusted to a rising star at the company, Hidetaka Miyazaki. To From Software's surprise, the game was a resounding success not only in Japan, but internationally as well, and the rest is history. Dark Souls is an action game inspired by works such as the manga Berserk, with a slow combat system, obscure game mechanics, and a non-linear story. The game set itself apart from all the other games of the time. To accurately evaluate this game, I'll break down the gameplay, presentation, and the story. Also, I'll be playing the remastered version offline, because it's available and I've heard nasty stories about hackers. While the likeliness of me being affected by such a thing is low, it's not a risk I'm willing to take on. Plus, I don't really care about PvP aspects of Souls game, to be quite honest with you. With that out of the way, let's get started. Dark Souls is a hard game, no doubt, but the way in which the game presents its difficulty is very interesting, in a sadistic way. The source of Dark Souls difficulty isn't just one simple thing, however. The experience can be broken down to three main components: exploration, combat, and reward. While it has the same structure as basically every video game ever, it's From Software's interpretation of these concepts that makes them unique. After the really epic intro, the game starts here, in a dark, moldy jail cell in the Undead Asylum. Just like any giddy adventurer, I checked if there's a map anywhere. Normally you always have a map in your game, you know? That's where I found out that Dark Souls doesn't play by anyone's rule. There was no map. At first glance, this seems like a bad design choice for the exploration since no one likes being lost. It's a frustrating experience.
Where the f am I?
But what if the point of the journey is to be lost? Picture this, you're going out on a Friday with your friends. You guys know some bars but are open to anything. Then, being out with the boys is almost always better than getting to the place itself. That's the soul of Dark Souls exploration. Without the comfort of having a designated driver, of course. It teaches us, the players, to open our minds to a new mindset. Instead of being goal-oriented and constantly looking for the next thing to do, you're supposed to take your time, go around and look at things. The path will slowly reveal itself to you. Another perk of having no direct guide is that you can take ownership of your exploration. In many video games, you're given fetch quests as excuses to explore the world. Go here, get this thing, kill this enemy, and hopefully find something interesting in the process. But Dark Souls chose a different approach. Here it's up to you to do everything. There's no floating quest marker or task reminder at the top of the screen to orientate you. If you play this game without a guide, it's a given that you will miss out on many discoveries. There are people who never found the bonfire at Sense Fortress or knew you could return to the Undead Asylum. And people. All of these tucked away loots, NPCs, and interactions are proofs of your ownership over your experience. Also, it's not like Dark Souls didn't have any navigation tool. Most walkable paths are quite narrow, so there's either forward or back. In Blighttown, the game uses torches to mark ladders, so if you follow the fire, you should be safe. Once you're on the ground floor, the safe surface wouldn't hinder your speed or poison you. The game uses a lot of these context clues to subtly guide you into the intended direction. There's no need for a map, you can just look around and have a general idea of where to go. Before yellow paint, this is how you do world design. Going into Dark Souls, I was fully prepared to feel the pain of dying. That Asmongold crash out clip was funny until it was your turn to lose your mind. But once again, this game managed to prove me entirely wrong. Dark Souls has a very unconventional approach to death. In most video games, dying means defeat. The game instant is gone, your progress is reverted to the last save point, and you have to do everything again. The mechanic simply acts as a gate holding you back from progress until you amass a certain in-game resource. I thought I would get the same thing here, so I tried to play Dark Souls as safe as possible to avoid dying. Then I died. A lot. After my 20th death, I had a revelation. I had misunderstood this game from the beginning. You see, this insane video game was designed entirely based off the principle of trial and error. Yes, it means that you're supposed to fail the first time by design. Unless you have prior knowledge of the traps and enemy ambushes, the game will get you. This design philosophy completely recontextualized the act of dying. You die all the time, but instead of arbitrarily holding you back from progress, dying is part of the process itself. With each death, you're supposed to learn from your mistakes and make it further, until you finally overcome the challenge. Death is part of the learning experience, not a tool to torture you. Dark Souls is about as brutal and punishing as your unwillingness to learn. If something doesn't work after 2 hours of you trying it, maybe it wasn't a good idea to begin with. This lesson was beaten into me in the catacombs. The first time around, this place was a nightmare to navigate because of how dark it was in the caves. On top of that, you have to constantly deal with the skeletons and exploding skulls. I was losing my mind in this place, dying more times than I could remember, trying to make it through. Turns out there are shortcuts that allowed you to bypass the whole area. Had I been a bit more observant, I would have seen that there are ledges that I could drop down to, but my stubbornness stopped me from finding new ways to solve the puzzle. So after 3 hours of bashing my head against the wall, I found out that I could skip the entire thing in like 20 seconds. Needless to say, I was upset. Going into this, I fully expected the combat of Dark Souls to be insanely hard. Now, please refer to Exhibit A. While it was challenging, it wasn't difficult the way I thought. Dark Souls was made in the late 2000s when hack and slash games still dominated the market. Every game has a slick and responsive combat system, fancy combos and flashy visual effects. Then there's this. Dark Souls is everything except the power fantasy when you start it. There will be a lot of panic rolling, miss attacks, input reading, and dying. To put it short, it's brutal to play this game the first time. Yet somehow, the toughest challenge to overcome is actually your own habits. The first and most obvious difference between Dark Souls and other action games is this little green bar right here, the stamina bar. With most weapons in the early game, you could get 3 attacks in before being exhausted. But a fight isn't just you swinging away at enemies, you need to dodge or parry their attacks too, and those also consume stamina. This feature massively slows down the combat, turning it into a delicate dance. You have to be smart about your approach and manage your stamina so some random bozo won't do a grab attack on you. On top of that, there's a slight input delay. From the time you press the button to the animation being played, there's a small delay depending on your stats. The animations also have a duration, and you're vulnerable during it. Also, your inputs are buffered, meaning that all of your button presses are saved in a queue. This will then be executed even if you got knocked down. You got animation locked too, so there's no backing out of any action. And miss a parry, you get 70 to 80% of the supposed damage. Press roll too late and got knocked down? Don't worry, the game got you. Enjoy falling off that ledge at the Blighttown entrance. These features offer you absolutely no advantage. In fact, they're only there to make your life harder. Why, you might ask? Because this game loves throwing curveballs at you until you learn. Jokes aside, how does the combat feel? For me, it felt great. There are many lists of best weapons in Souls game, but to me personally, this beauty right here is unmatched. The simple but elegant Great Club. The The combat of Dark Souls can have incredible depth, especially if you dual wield, since you have to keep track of 2 weapons timing as well as enemies. But with the good Upgrade Club, the only timing that matters is how fast the monsters die. Most die in 2 or 3 hits as long as you upgrade it, and this thing staggers them like an estranged father after 15 years of no contact. It works even better with the 2-handed strike since it's an attack that almost always guarantees a knockdown. It really is the perfect caveman bonk stick. But if you want to have an easier time, try magic. I haven't gotten to it, but magic builds are known to be very strong in Souls game and Dark Souls is no exception. To my credit, however, there's one thing I actually got right about Dark Souls, and it's the boss fights. I was so right about how good they are for the wrong reasons. They're good not because they require skill, but because you can learn them. All the boss fights in this game are designed around trial and error, just like anything else. You will die until you learn how to beat them. The first boss, the Asylum Demon, teaches the drop attack and the basic of reading telegraphs from enemies. When you attack from a height, you deal massive damage with some blowback. In case the thing you attack didn't die immediately, you have to then look at their animation and anticipate an attack so you can time your dodge. Or you can just tank it with your face. The next notable boss is the Capra Demon. This guy is fairly early in the game, and his fight is infamous for being annoying. His attack pattern covers the whole place, not to mention the 2 rabbit dogs beside him. If you want to approach this fight normally, prepare for a world of pain. But if you want to break the game, this is your chance. In Dark Souls, anything goes. Miyazaki said it himself that there's no cheap tactic in his games. Some challenges are puzzles designed to encourage creative problem solving. You don't always need to brute force everything, so that's exactly what I did. I flung shit at him till he dies. Thank you, Miyazaki. Another well-known glitch is before the arena where you fight with Manus, the final boss of the DLC. After navigating through the chasm of the abyss, you enter the arena by being grabbed from a ledge. But instead of entering the fog gate straight away, what you can do is go to the right of the gate and look down. See that right there? That's our guy, Manus. In case you have a great bow and around 100,000 souls just lying around, try this. It's still in the remastered version, so I would say it's a feature. One game I used to play a lot is League of Legends. There's a concept in that game called tethering. To avoid being attacked at close range and lose sight of enemy from the distance, you tether yourself to them, maintaining a fixed distance. They move forward, you move backward, and vice versa. This concept is the core of the Ornstein and Smough fight, best one in the game in my opinion. If you are too far away from Ornstein, the spear user, he will do a gap closing dash that's almost impossible to react to. Even when you have the timing right, you still have to roll into him. Same with Smough, he will do a hammer rush that ends with an upward swing. If you get caught by either attacks, they can stun lock you to death. Staying too close is also not a good idea. Smough will jump up and do a ground pound, while Ornstein does a series of fast spear thrusts. Initially, this duo seemed unbeatable, but you need to keep in mind, this game is designed for you to learn it. With a heavy weapon, the trick is to maintain a perfect distance so Ornstein won't do his dash. Then you bait Smough into doing the ground pound and exploit his cooldown duration. Repeat until he's dead and the fight is as good as over, since the second phase with Ornstein is significantly easier. Besides tethering, the game also teaches you to fight without the lock-on so you can keep both enemies in sight. Ornsteins will sometimes do sidesteps after his dash, trapping you in a pincer. Lastly, you can exploit the pillars to counter their gap closing and range attacks. If you see something hard to dodge, get behind a pillar. Master these 3 skills here and you can run circles around most bosses in the game. But nothing in life is perfect. If there's a best boss fight, then it suggests the existence of the worst fight in the game. Well, indeed there is one. This piece of shit dragon right here. Kalami is a boss in the DLC zone Ulasil. Everything about this fight is perfectly fine. except for one single move that boils my blood. You see, if you choose to fight Calamite the normal way, which is asking Hawkeye go for help, he'd shoot it down so you can fight it in the huge waterfall arena. This open space has no obstacle to block attacks, so you have to rely on reading boss telegraphs and good positioning. Except there is an attack I just couldn't react to at all. Calamite has a very disgusting move to close the gap between you and him. It's a dash with like 5 frames of telegraph. Then, he either does a head or leg swipe, which covers pretty much half the arena. But the most frustrating part about this is that I always got caught by it. Dodge forward into him, backward, to the sides, doesn't matter. The dash still got me. It's truly a shame because the rest of Calamite's moves is actually very fair. Every attack needs at least a second to charge up, the attack's paths are easy to learn, and then there's that disgusting dash that will almost guarantee to ruin your day. I died here far less than when I fought Onsen in Smoke, but the fight felt so unfair, it left such a bitter aftertaste. The game has set up every boss so that once you learn their moves, you can master them. But against Calamite, there's no meaning to learning. The game can just overrule that and hit me anyway. It's the only fight in the game that I genuinely felt terrible afterward. No triumph, only relief that I don't have to deal with it anymore. Dark Souls is a very fair game. It always matches the challenge with the reward. Every time I go off the beaten path, I was greeted with some nice loots. Could be souls, gears, or even an NPC whose questline I will ignore. This is positive reinforcement, a simple but very effective trick to encourage players to explore the game. Before you know it, you find yourself checking every corner of the game for some hidden secret. Sometimes you hit the jackpot. I still remember how I found my beloved Great Club by pure coincidence. I was lost, poisoned with no potion, and chased by a horde of mosquitoes alongside fucking Nunu from League of Legends. Death was inevitable, so I grabbed the item on the ground. Little did I know I was gonna find love in a poisoned swamp. Put a smile on my face every time I hear this. Second type of reward is the memorable moments with the game. I bet you can still recall the first time you found a hidden wall by yourself in a Souls game. That excitement of finding a new area coupled with the anxious feeling that you're walking into something unknown and dangerous. All of it just hits you like a truck. The loot is virtual, but the emotions you felt while playing Dark Souls were real. The satisfactions of getting revenge on that one mob that killed you before is amazing. I remember being terrified of those Black Knights in the Burg at the beginning. About halfway through the game, I got stuck at An Orlando, so I decided to go back and fight them. The empowerment I felt after flattening them in 2 hits was just unreal. It gets even better with boss fights too. As much as I hate that one move of Calamite, the concept of a lone human throwing it down with a dragon is so badass. Each dev made the victory screen all the more sweeter. But above all this, I feel like I've received the best gift a piece of media can ever give me. It's resilience. I had to step away from my computer so many times out of frustration. My friends were there to witness my mental breakdown as I was going through the catacombs. After dying so many times, I was desensitized to it. That's when everything clicked in my head and I saw the truth. It was never about dying. The entire game was never about punishing me for failing. Dark Souls invited me to learn and improve at every turn, but I refused to meet it. I was fixated on my idea of what playing a game perfectly looks like. That's what was hindering my enjoyment of the game. When I think about it, who's gonna shame me for dying 200 times? So what if I'm not good at a game I've never played before? I decided to let it all go and embrace death. I still died a lot, but instead of being angry, I was elated. Each death is a chance for me to learn how to solve the puzzle the game presented me, and I practically have infinite tries. The game showed me that true failure is not dying but giving up and going hollowed. As long as I have the willpower to try again, my humanity remains intact and eventually I will reach my goal. Dark Souls broke me down and reforged me into a stronger person. I think that's the ultimate reward a game or any piece of media could ever give me. Despite not having cutting-edge graphics, Dark Souls is a very good looking game, and the remastered version managed to capture this beauty very well. There are 2 main factors that have created this iconic Souls aesthetic: the art style and lighting. If you look really closely at any spot on the wall or on the ground, it's clear that the texture is not too detailed. Here's where the lighting comes into play. If you pay attention, a lot of areas in the game aren't well lit. Say for An Orlando, the Firelink Shrine, and the Ulasil Township, the light source for the entire game is either torches, lava, or nothing at all. Not only does it help create a suspenseful atmosphere, since you can't see shit, it also hides a lot of the shortcoming in graphic. The game would direct your attention to brighter areas and put a lot of details there. Then it would show you the inaccessible zones, which are a lot less visible, and your imagination fills in the blank. Dark Souls use this trick very often. Doing this not only saves computing power, but also adds a layer of mystery to the world. Even after I drained the ruins of New Londo, there were still deeper areas that are unreachable. You could barely see them with the torches. Every time I crossed the wooden bridge from the shrine, that endless darkness down there stares right back at me. Most of Dark Souls' atmosphere was achieved thanks to the amazing lighting. But if Dark Souls' lighting is what made the game pleasant to look at, then its art style is what made the game unforgettable. While Dark Souls is not the only dark fantasy game with a medieval European aesthetic, the way the game pushes the style to its limit is one of a kind. The visual of Dark Souls struck the perfect balance between elegance and grotesque. It's subtle but still distinct. When you're spending time in an area, the game lets you immerse yourself in the experience completely. Everything has a reason to be there and to look the way they do. You wouldn't find a room covered in moss in Arno Londo or a nice looking vase in the Darkroot Basin. This visual cohesion makes sure your gameplay is as consistent as possible, because nothing in the background jumps at you. This is the perfect canvas for the true star of the art style, the creature design. Dark Souls has some iconic monsters that you cannot mistake for any other franchise. If you're familiar with the game, I just need to show you the silhouette of a boss or a character, and you can instantly tell who that is. Quelaag is a woman fused with a spider.
I'm coming. I'm coming!
Gaping Dragon is a huge walking vulva with teeth, and Smo looks like the average McDonald's enjoyer. Once you see them, it's impossible to forget. The mobs are also varied enough to not repeat across many areas, so two places never look samey. Another interesting aspect of presentation of Dark Souls is the level design. By that I mean everything from the layout of each zone to enemy and trap placements. This ranges from satisfyingly clever to downright sadistic. One thing I absolutely adore about the world of Lordran is the connectivity. Whenever you arrive at a new place, you will come across some doors that won't open from this side, or a contraption that doesn't work initially. These most likely are shortcuts that you will unlock during exploration. Just keep an eye out and you can gain access to these. But sometimes, you find areas that somehow are connected to each other through sheer coincidence. During my first playthrough, I found the Valley of Drakes by complete accident. I was losing my mind trying to find the second Bell of Awakening. After taking the water wheel, thinking I would find the bell, I was greeted with a dragon. At this point I was too annoyed to give this thing a fair fight, so I turned it into a hedgehog. Do you see that tower? Somehow that leads to the Darkroot Basin, which is also accessible from the Undead Parish and the Berg Watchtower. Needless to say, I was completely blown away. By linking zones that at first don't seem connected at all, From Software makes Lordran feels lived in. Of course you can get to Blighttown through the depths, it's a dumping ground of the sewer system. New Londo is in the mountain, so by opening the floodgate you can access the Valley of Drakes. They're right next to each other in terms of geography. The world design just makes sense. And when you find that shortcut back to the Firelink Shrine or the beginning of the area, it feels great. It's easier to get around, you don't have to go through the trouble again, and it's satisfying because your exploration is rewarded nicely. There is fast travel in the form of warping between the bonfires, but you get it halfway through the game, so for the most part, a shortcut is a lifesaver. In one of the interviews, Dark Souls game director Miyazaki said that a lot of the set pieces in his game are for humor or to be memorable. He didn't lie when he said it, he just failed to mention that I'm the bottom of the joke. The punchline is often just me flying off a cliff. It's also memorable because the challenges you face are so genuinely disgusting. The game starts very slowly with the poison swamp. Unless you prepared a decent amount of purple moss, you will be poisoned for a long time in Blighttown. Yet contrary to popular belief, I think Blighttown is still a very comfortable place to be. Why? Because Sense Fortress exists. There aren't that many traps in the tower, the main attraction is the thin bridge with the swinging blades. Getting through them is not very hard once you get the rhythm down and don't have much gear on. But the learning process was horrible, for me at least. This place broke me. Like a beat to many other fighters, it took me to a deep dark place and let me discover myself. Especially the last bridge. I fell down from there too often I didn't even bother counting anymore. And each fall means doing everything all over again. It doesn't help that the bonfire is tucked away on a hidden balcony at the top. no one would think to look there, especially if you have a giant throwing fire bombs at you. Another memorable roadblock is the Silver Knights in Arnolondo. I'm sure the developer was giggling to themselves when they placed those archers there. Let's make our player walk on a thin bridge with 4 giant knights shooting torpedoes at them. I struggled against these for quite a bit, until I remember I can shoot them with poison arrows. Dark Souls absolutely nailed it in terms of music. Judging on the quality of the score, the game is already above average. It is a great treat to have the music hyping you up during the boss fight. Just listen to this. However, the true genius of the music doesn't lie in the tracks themselves, but rather when they're used. To be precise, there are only 2 occasions outside of a boss fights that you can hear the background music. The first one is at the Firelink Shrine, and the second one is in the Chamber of the Princess. Other than that, the game has no background music at all. From a gameplay perspective, it makes sense because some enemies or traps have sound cues, so the absence of the music makes it easier for you to detect those. But this is a very unconventional choice, even by today's standard. Most games uses music to build an atmosphere for the experience. It makes the downtime less boring and the combat encounters much more exciting. If it's any other game, the lack of music would be quite boring. The Dark Souls found a way to use this to its advantage. As I've analyzed earlier, the moment-to-moment gameplay is already very intense, especially if you're playing it for the first time. You never know what's waiting for you around the corner, so by taking away the music, your attention is fully concentrated on the environment. Any sound will stand out, especially in more quiet areas where there's nothing else polluting the soundscape, so your imagination can go to overdrive trying to put an image to this bizarre or creepy sound you're hearing. It's an amazing tool to build tension. Another benefit of using music sparingly is, we could do the little experiment right now. Listen to this and tell me how you feel. This is the music you hear at the Firelink Shrine. By having no music at all, you can't help but associate safety and comfort with this music, because that's how you feel at the shrine. Nothing attacks you here, and you can talk to the NPCs you met on the way. The game helps you build an emotional bond with the location, just by manipulating when you hear the music. The lack of a background soundtrack also enhances the boss fights. Normally, you just hear the sounds of your equipment, the environment, and the monsters. Suddenly, your ears are graced by a full orchestra playing the most epic music you could possibly imagine, but then you die because the boss did something you've never seen before. The smart world design and usage of music made me love spending time in Lordran. Every moment is filled with intensity mixed with a sense of wonder that is rarely seen in other games before or since Dark Souls. Dark Souls doesn't really have a story. It has a lot of backstory, don't get me wrong, but in terms of narrative it's not even worth mentioning. There's some exposition at the beginning, but other than the NPC quests, which will be missed if you don't follow guides, there's not much going on. In fact, I don't think the typical structure of a story can even be applied here. From Software approaches story the same way they did graphic, they covered the lack thereof by using the mood setting tools. Since the story is almost non-existent anyway, let's have next to no dialogues. We all know that New Londo was flooded to contain the Dark Race, but how did they do that? Was there any fighting? Did anyone try to defeat the 4 kings first before they decided to just delete the whole kingdom? Who were they? All of these questions have no direct answers in the base game. If you don't get the Dark Hand item, you don't even know why the Dark Wraiths are so dangerous. In the on-scene Nismo arena, you can see 3 pedestals with only 2 statues. What happened to the third one on the left? Did they destroy it, or was it never completed? Personally, I'm not a big fan of this style. While I can appreciate what the game was going for, it feels empty once it's over. I think this is because most of the game I play are very story heavy. I went into Dark Souls with certain expectations, so when I realized that the game was coming to an end, I was left wanting. It's true that I had a lot of fun memories with the game, but they were limited because I didn't get to truly know the world. There's only so much information that can be conveyed through a small item description. It It was really frustrating because I want to enjoy the beauty of this world while I'm in the game. I don't want to go onto YouTube, search up a 10-year-old video just so I can understand the story of a boss. I'm not saying I need everything spelled out for me, but without proper context, the game slowly felt like a chore. Oh yeah, I gotta kill X and Y to relink the fire. Got it, boss. Why do I need to do that? But what if I don't do it? How would it affect the world? Don't know, just relink the fire. When I go through a story, I always hope for some memorable story beats to provide context for my cool gameplay, but Dark Souls didn't provide that. The story was a blur with the phrase relink the fire being repeated in the background. It's not a bad thing, I just wanted something different from the game. After finishing Dark Souls, I understand why so many people love the franchise now. The game is a very charming and unique experience, full of funny as well as frustrating moments. It takes all the conventions we know about video games and subvert them. From Software has succeeded in creating an amazing world with seemingly endless mysteries for their fans to enjoy and obsess over. I think Dark Souls really deserves to be the ultimate game of all time, simply for the fact that it was so ahead of its time. So yes, Dark Souls is really that good. If you enjoyed the video, check out this one too. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!